So let's start with what got you into this realm of study and what you do actually.
Okay. Well, in terms of what I do, I've got a day job like everybody else, but what my passion is spirituality, and so I run the YouTube channel Lifting the Lamp, where I share my knowledge that I've accumulated over the years into Western esotericism and magic and things like that. And the way that I got involved in studying those topics was really an interest that began when I was very young. I've always been sensitive to things as a child, had interesting dreams and interesting experiences. And so finding the occult was something that unfolded quite naturally from that. I had some past life experiences when I was 13, where I saw myself meditating in the desert as an ancient Egyptian priest or magician who followed Thoth. And that is following that and researching that connection is ultimately what led me to Western esotericism and then to the OTO, who was teaching that material. And in terms of my interest in the light beings in UAPs, it was kind of unrelated to my interest in magic and the occult. I had some of the experiences that I had when I was a child related to dreams about aliens or visitors from another place. And I lost interest in the topic as I got older, but my interest in UAPs was really reinvigorated in 2013 when I was a community journalist, and I was assigned a story about looking into UFO sightings over Perth, because there'd been a spike at that time. UFOs being the jargon that was used for these things back then. And it was through the course of interviewing people for that story that I came across. I was directed towards the work of Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, in terms of the CE5 protocols. And eventually, when the conditions were right, a few months later, I tried the CE5 protocols. And as a result of that, I had my experiences with orbs, what I like to call light beings.
Okay, that's a fascinating route. So in regards to the research and then the journalism into the phenomenon, so that last week, that took me down to Washington, D.C., and I attended the congressional hearing on UAP disclosure. And it was fascinating all around, George Knapp and the other witnesses. One thing that jumped out at me was Dylan Borland's testimony. And I think, so briefly, he mentioned that he said, quote, what he witnessed was that the UAP stopped about 100 feet in front of me.
On the base, I lived in the barracks. There was a little smoke pit outside. I was there on the telephone and looking across to the flight line, and I see a white light pop up and stop about 100 feet in the air. I thought it was a weather balloon. I've seen tests from there before, weeknight, normal thing, not surprising. I actually finished my cigarette and I began walking up towards the flight line. There is a track, and because I was on 3 months of night work, I would walk the track at night when we were weathered down, And as I began walking towards the light, towards the flight line and the track, the light then flies across the base, across the flight line, and as it flies to me, a triangle manifests around the light. I can't tell you if it's active camouflage. I can't tell you if it appeared around the light, but I can tell you that it was a white light and then it was a triangle. It stopped about 100 feet in front of me and approximately 100 feet above me. My telephone got extremely hot, completely froze, dead. I remember how thick it was. It was between 1 to 2 stories thick, equilateral triangle. I could never see the top of it, and the edges were 90 degrees. There were 4 lights in total, 1 light on each corner and a larger light in the center, 2 to 3 times the size of the corner lights. But what was really odd was the outside. The best way to describe it is like looking at a James Webb telescope picture where you have the colors and then the black background. So the craft itself was this black metallic flake paint, but on top of the craft was this gold, lava, plasma, some type of fluid going over and around the craft. I'm under this for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then the center light flashes 2 to 3 times, no sound, immediately shoots up to commercial jet level minimum, in my opinion.
So here's the thing that jumped out. On top of the craft was this gold, lava, plasma, some type of fluid going over and around the craft. Maybe what he saw was an orb, which in fact, I guess he's describing that, but maybe that's what's inside the orb. Maybe that's what I had seen in Seattle. Maybe that's what you'd seen. But in hearing that testimony, what is your opinion from your background of maybe what he saw?
Well, from my background and having done a bit more research into this topic, following on from Matthew Brown pulling me into the subject matter with his X post, and including looking through his Immaculate Constellation report, it seems like there's a couple of different types of phenomenon within the phenomenon, so to speak. So on the one hand, you've got these metallic, technological looking craft, and then on the other, you've got these more spectral or spiritual light vehicles. And they're not necessarily the same, but whether or not they are the same thing or something different is a big question mark, I think. And another intriguing possibility is that rather than perhaps the more technological craft coming from another planet and being separate from the more spiritual orbs, one thing that people have suggested is that these things manifest some kind of physical phenomenon that looks like technology because they are interdimensional, and that's part of the way they try and interact with us. But their true form is actually something outside of space and time. So these are all possibilities that sort of swim around in my head as I think about what Andrew saw. What Dylan saw. And in terms of his first description of a orb of light, it sounds similar to what I saw. It sounds similar to what you saw, Andrew, and it could be the same, but there's just so many things we don't know. What I'd really be interested in is how much has the government studied this? How much can they answer our questions about what's spiritual, what's extraterrestrial, to what extent are they related to each other? And I mean, that's my big hope for disclosure, but I don't know if I'm going to get that. And I don't even know if the US government or any government knows that themselves.
Yeah, I think that's the big question, right? Like what they know, what they might know. Um, as well, the people, the power structure behind it, and then like the churches and um, that go back millennium. And so on your channel, you've done some great research. I've just, looked at some of it, but one thing that you've uncovered was some interesting possible UAP sightings in biblical texts. Now, I've done some research. I know other people have, Jack Valet and more contemporary people have been looking at more, esoteric work for evidence. But I think that a couple of things that you found were quite striking and unique and so central to our culture. And I'm specifically referring to your observations of the UAP in the Bible regarding the Star of Bethlehem, and then after that, the sword star over Jerusalem. So, for the sake of the interview, the video, perhaps you can, in your own terms, describe what you had found and what you see as possible evidence of UAP in these two biblical stories.
So what I found was that there appear to be in the New Testament and then the writings of Josephus, covering the events directly after the New Testament, there seems to be phenomena which fit the description of modern day UAP sightings. So the first one is the Star of Bethlehem, which appeared to herald Jesus' arrival. And there's a few things that are striking about that, which is similar to modern UAP encounters, I think. The first is the way that the star behaves, in terms of it appears and then it disappears and then it reappears later in the narrative of the gospel, and then it moves so that the Magi can follow it. And once it reaches a particular location, it stops dead in the sky. And nothing else does that. A comet doesn't do that. A planetary alignment doesn't do that. But it's quite common for UAP phenomena to behave that way. The other thing that I found quite striking was how in the lead up to the appearance of this light, this mysterious star, you had apparitions of angels and communications with divine beings, which again is very similar to the UAP phenomenon. We talk a lot about the lights that people see, but there's a whole other part of the encounter surrounding that, which has to do with telepathic communications and messages being delivered for the human race. And that's been my experience as well with the CE5 protocols. The dreams that I had about aliens as a child were very much priming me for seeing them physically later, seeing the orbs physically later. So that's the Star of Bethlehem. And then again, with the sword star that appears in the writings of Josephus, it's very similar to UAP. It's a mysterious star that stops over Jerusalem. And it's one of about 7 signs that Josephus gives that were occurring in Jerusalem before the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. And a few of those actually sound like UAP type events. There was a mysterious light, like dawn breaking at night, which appears in the temple itself. There was other reports of an army in the sky. And all of these seem to be pointing towards a similar phenomenon to the modern UAP. And what is really interesting about these ones, that these ancient UAP encounters, if you will, is that they surround events that are critical to the history of the world, and particularly the history of world religion and our relationship with God.
Yeah, you reference, and then you tie it in with Matthew Brown's recent testimony, and of course his report, Immaculate Constellation, and tie it in with the Immaculate Conception of Mary, and I think that's an interesting tie-in. So perhaps he's in, perhaps the government is aware of this sort of biblical tie-in, and these whistleblowers are aware of that as well. There's something going on there that meshes this UAP with the occult, let's say, or spirituality.
That certainly seems to be the case based on the example you just gave. And another thing that's interesting about the Immaculate Constellation report is that Matthew Brown finishes it. He finishes it with a Latin phrase, but before that, the last line of the last paragraph of the report itself is "Be not afraid." And that is a phrase that is repeated throughout the Bible when angels appear towards mortal human beings. And it's in fact what the angel Gabriel said to Mary when he appeared to her in the lead up to the appearance of the Star of Bethlehem, and of course the birth of Christ. So perhaps they do know more than they're letting on.
Could you explain just briefly, of course, there's an entire topic in and of itself, what the aethers in regards to the Enochian calls and John Dee would refer to, and what kind of entities they might, like how do they exist, and what different, like what's the science between their realm and our realm? Is it a density thing, or what is that, the differentiation there, in your opinion?
So the aethers in Enochian Magick refers to 30 levels of the cosmos, what would have been referred to as heaven in religion. And this is where these angelic beings reside. It's really a byword for the heavens. And the use of the term aether is interesting here because it comes from the Greek ether, which was the fifth element. And so what it's talking about really is some concept of a form of existence beyond the physical reality that we're familiar with. That was the four elements for the Greeks, and for us, it's the world of the physics that we're familiar with. So these Enochian entities exist in that realm beyond our world. And they do appear to be objective, external beings. They're not just something that's in our head, because people do the same rituals and see the same entities. But there does seem to be some interdimensional element to them as well, because one author in particular, Vincent Bridges, has pointed out that many of the tables which contain Enochian figures and Enochian names that are used in the Enochian system of magic unfold in a four-dimensional pattern. And so it's almost like the whole system of magic is trying to describe something extra dimensional using symbols and language that we will understand, that will be able to compress that into something we understand, like the Tesseract as a three-dimensional representation of a four-dimensional object. So that's where I think these Enochian entities come from. And they, in the view of the Enochian magical practitioners, these are the angels of the Bible. And what I would like to know is, let me walk that back a bit. What I'm starting to believe myself is that these same beings are behind many of the orbs that get described in modern UAP accounts.
Yeah, I think that may be where we're coming from. And I think that evidence and knowledge of this goes much further back than our modern world. And I think, I think we'll be wrapping it up, but I just, there's something on my mind, which it's not like the current subject but it's an ongoing study of mine. And because of your interest and involvement with the OTO, I want to know and I couldn't find it on your YouTube site, but what's your opinion of the former head of the OTO, Aleister Crowley, who was in the OTO from 1912 to 1914. He was the head of the British branch, and there's so much said about this gentleman. He, everything from he is, a legitimate master to a devil worshiper. What's your take on him? Was he, did he go Ori, or was he right on, or what's your opinion on this character?
Aleister Crowley is a very complex character. He definitely had some personality traits that were very unpleasant. And from a point of view of modern psychology, definitely on the dark triad spectrum. And some of his ideas did have a flavor of the spiritual dark side to them. But by the same account, he was a brilliant magician, and he was able to pass on a lot of really great knowledge from previous centuries to a new generation of occultists. So in that regard, he had a really positive influence. But it's really mixed with him. You can't pin him down, really. I've I've distanced myself from him as I've gone on, because I think that there's just too many things about him that were on the negative side. But all of the things that he brought from the mysteries of previous societies, of things that I still continue to adhere to today. And I have him to thank for that, regardless of his personal flaws.
Okay, that's a very reasoned, balanced assessment of a very complex character. Okay, well, with that, I want to thank you for your time and sharing your thoughts with us. And maybe we'll keep in touch. And I wish you the best then. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.
Take care.
You too.